The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn has been fighting for workers' rights in Australia for more than 100 years. They believe the law should serve everyone and not just those that can afford it. So for empathetic and expert legal support, call Maurice Blackburn Lawyers today. All right, let's get on with today's episode.
Welcome, everybody. Round of applause. Thank you for making it.
We've made it.
We've made it. Hi, I'm Raph and I'm a friend of the podcast.
And I'm Fergus Neal, social media influencer.
Stephen asked us if we'd open up the show this evening. So welcome everyone to a special live edition of the Socially Democratic podcast celebrating Labor's landslide victory.
Give yourselves a round of applause. Killing it. And, we're having fun. There's a lot of political nerds in here. I can feel it. There's a lot of good LinkedIn heads, which is sick. Raph works with most of these people, so his career is on the line. Whereas kind of just journeyed in here.
Yeah.
No, go Labor. Yes, down with Thatcher. All right.
Anyway, we're talking about the victory.
Right. Yeah, we're talking about the victory. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and what a victory it was. The House now resembles Carlton in the 80s.
A Labor stronghold.
Run by an Italian.
Woo! It's a genuine privilege to open today's event. When Stephen asked me to do the introduction, I was deeply moved because he offered money, which in my culture is very important.
But, yeah, right, because you're Jewish.
No, I was actually referring to the culture of the Labour movement, a fair day's pay for a fair day's work.
Okay, that's my bad. I went off script.
I think you have the notes from the Greens election victory gig.
Just hold for the laughs, all right? We'll hold for the laughs, and the Greens are still holding for the absentee vote. So it's going to be okay, all right?
What I was trying to say, Ferg, was work without wages is like the SDA without Catholicism.
It's not worth the trouble.
There you go. And speaking of trouble...
we are blessed today to be joined by David Feeney. Can we have a round of applause for David Feeney?
Woo!
Yes.
You may have seen David Feeney on Stephen's podcast before.
But have you seen his Irish citizenship renunciation papers?
Okay, we'll find them, David. Don't worry.
Everybody, have a look under your seats.
You check between the pillows. David, when was the last time you remember having it? Okay, he just looks mad. Let's move on. Jessie McCrone is also on the panel tonight. Give a round of applause for Jessie.
Raph, didn't you once worked for Jessie?
Work is a strong term. I mainly hid from her.
Say more.
Anytime I saw her coming down the hall, I would run into the stationery cupboard.
So you never had any professional interactions?
I think once she asked for a pen. I think she thought I worked in the cupboard.
Okay. Well, now, we've had some drinks and we're at a live podcast. You no longer work for her. Is there anything that you want to say now that you're out of the cupboard?
We were often running low on staples, Jessie.
It was an austere government, so, no wonder Labor had a surplus last year.
Okay. All right. Woo, surplus. All right, cool.
One clap!
There we go. They don't like surpluses in this room.
Yeah, Labor never loved it. All right.
Okay, later on the panel, we'll also be joined by Benita Kolovos, the Guardian's Victorian State correspondent.
I'm a huge Guardian fan. Probably my favourite blog.
What do you mean blog?
Well, it's second favourite after Gizmodo and Yahoo, but it's up there.
No, we're kidding, Benita. The Guardian is a real paper.
Who else would have the courage to publish such groundbreaking articles such as Experience, I was swallowed by a hippo.
Or Experience, I fought off a polar bear with a saucepan.
Experience, I walked the length of the UK with a donkey.
Experience. I went blind after doing 13 cartwheels in a row.
That one was good. All right, that one was dope.
I heard it was scooped Nick McKenzie with that one.
Shout out, Nick. Or experience. I donated my uterus to a stranger. Now we're close friends.
That one actually sounds interesting. How about, did you ever read Experience? I create smells that scare people.
Does that deserve its own article? I feel we've all eaten at Smith Street Kebabs before.
How about this one? This was actually written by a friend of mine. Experience. I was quick to ignore parental guidance, but when Dad told me to take cheese off my car, I should have listened. And this one, I think, is the most quintessential Guardian article. Experience. I'm allergic to nearly everything.
Except for maybe. Experience. My boyfriend lives with my husband. To be clear, that was a joke about Guardian readers being homeowners, not polyamorous cucks.
Okay.
I feel like I could get assassinated after this. There's so much super in this room.
Okay. So we used most of our time on the Guardian bit, but before we get into the podcast...
It was worth it.
We wanted to do a quick recap on some of the major events of the election.
So the election, it was originally slated for April 12th.
But along came a cyclone.
It was originally labelled Cyclone Anthony, but the bomb later downgraded the political crisis, renaming it Cyclone Alfred.
Many homes in southeast Queensland were impacted, but thankfully the bomb's worst fears did not eventuate.
Both leaders responded strongly to this national crisis, with Anthony Albanese on the ground offering assistance.
And Peter Dutton doing a series of party fundraisers in Sydney.
Pray for him. Hope he's doing okay.
There we go. With 3 House seats in Brisbane, the Greens suddenly remembered the weather was a thing and began campaigning on free dental.
In an ironic twist... In an ironic twist, Cyclone Albanese would later claim 75% of the Greens' House seats, removing any need for smiling.
A week after the election, Bant had still not conceded his seat.
Kind of keeping up with the Greens' tradition of claiming credit for things Labor has helped.
When Bant finally conceded, he noted that he only lost because people who voted him before didn't want to do it again.
Bant's final act of solidarity with the people of Melbourne was to be evicted after 15 years by an NGO CEO from Richmond.
All right. Round of applause for Sarah Witty, everybody.
Woo!
The coalition handled their loss with a bit more grace.
Breaking up after 38 years together.
Okay. But within 1 week, they had reconciled.
After David Littleproud sent a message to Susan Ley explaining that the Nationals could change.
Leadership.
After the fiasco, Michael McCormack refused to endorse a machete ban in the party room.
There we go. But where did it all go wrong for the coalition?
Dutton went to the election promising to end work-from-home arrangements.
Explaining that he was sick of people avoiding him in the office.
Of course, Dutton... Sometimes I laugh at my own jokes. All right, it's okay. Dutton, he quickly backflipped on this policy.
Citing a desire to avoid Angus Taylor.
All right, we photoshopped that.
Peter Dutton opened his campaign with an appeal to the next generation.
Souls.
Bringing along his son to announce their new housing policy.
Peter Dutton's son, Tom Dutton, said it was near impossible to purchase a home at a normal income.
When asked if his father has ever joined him at an auction, Tom lamented, yes, it's actually quite embarrassing. When asked why, Tom said, he always outbids me. Dutton then chuckled, ruffled his son's hair, and called him a poor cunt. There's so much more to cover, from salmon fishing in the Tasman to Trump tariffs.
But Stephen only paid us for 5 minutes.
So without further ado, can we please welcome to the stage your hosts for this evening, Stephen Donnelly, David Feeney, and Jessie McCrone.
Can you please give it up for Fergus and for Raph? Well done. Let's get this underway. We are taping this one on a Thursday on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We're also taping this one on the boundaries of the federal Labor electorate of Melbourne. I really want to encourage clapping and yelling and carrying on. This cannot be like a branch meeting, people. All right, I just don't like that. What happened before would never happen at a branch meeting. So let's just continue that vibe.
That's a good idea. I'm willing to move that.
Yeah. Do you have a seconder, David?
Not usually.
No. There we go. We're off with the gags already. It's good. All right. We're also taping this in front of a sold-out show, which is really, really cool. When we first thought we would do this, we didn't know if anyone was going to come along. David still thinks 6 people only listen to the podcast, but as you can see, David, it's more than that. And it's also
I'm going to have to start behaving myself.
Yeah, well, it's also our 300th episode. That's a coincidence. We didn't know that. When we started this podcast 2 weeks before the 2019 federal election, thinking that it was going to be a good time to start a podcast and it was going to be a good sort of celebratory podcast after we won. Really tough to get a guest on the week after the election. Different circumstance this time. I've not only got a whole suite of people, but we've filled a room to celebrate this historic election that happened a couple of weeks ago. So we really appreciate you all coming here tonight. A bit of housekeeping for all of us. First of all, this is being recorded because it's a podcast, but not all of it will make the final cut for next week. We want to give our guests a bit of space to maybe drop some truth bombs. And some.
Have you been holding back?
I just don't like swearing. I think it's crude.
Particularly since your kids are in the audience. Just kind of give don't record it or anything. That's basically the point I'm trying to make. Thank you, Conrad, for laughing at that gag.
So smart, clever, nasty interjections will not make it.
Yeah, exactly. Also to note that, but we encourage you to take photos and share it on your social media. Yeah, absolutely. And I want you to take a photo of them. You're very good at that, so that needs to happen to promote the show. And on your seats, you'll see a card. And on that card is a QR code, which will link you to a Google document of some sort, which will have a list of all the categories, which we'll do in the second half of the show. So if you want to nominate anything for a particular category that we'll discuss, if it's clean, we'll read it out. So that's the housekeeping. Welcome everyone to Curtin House. Curtin House is a pretty historical place. Former Channel 7 state reporter Brendan Donahue told me the other day that this actually was the home of the Communist Party in the 1930s. And he would know. At the foundation meeting in 1937, Brendan did a live cross for 7 Nightly News. Thank you, Brendan. Brendan's here tonight. Good sport. Thank you, Brendan, for telling me that information. The Communist Party's residence here, however, wasn't here for a while. So it was very short-lived because they obviously sided with one of history's greatest murderers, Joseph Stalin. And the relevant authorities came and evicted them from Curtin House when the place was raided a couple of years after. The next tenant to move in was the National Secretariat of Catholic Action. Yeah, that's called Victory. Speaking of Catholic Action, I'd like to welcome our 2 guests to tonight's podcast. Starting with the first person who was educated by the Sisters of Mercy in the rolling hills of Adelaide. In his late teens, he swapped pie floaters and fruit chocks for the bright lights of Melbourne and the cafes of Carlton as he immersed himself in the world of student politics. His first real job was an industrial officer at the Transport Workers Union, and he went on to become the State Secretary of Victorian Labor and orchestrated the 2002 Brackslide. Despite his name appearing in the death notices of a major newspaper, David was resurrected on the 3rd day and was appointed the campaign director that led to the landslide at the 2006 South Australian state election. And then, as the National Assistant Secretary, he oversaw the mudslide at the the 2007 federal campaign. Oversaw. Yeah, you did. He proved mortality once again, despite being in the death seat on the Senate ticket for Victoria, was elected to the House of Review in 2008. In September 2009, he, and along with Senator Don Farrell, were verbally abused by the Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, whilst protesting about the paring back of MPs' campaign entitlements. 9 months later, Kevin Rudd was no longer Prime Minister of Australia. You earn these things, right? In 2013, David moved to the lower house and was elected the member for Batman because he wanted to be closer to the inner city cafe latte sipping NIMBYs of Northcote. In 2018, he stepped down from public office to take on the role of the Westgarth Primary booth captain. Would you please welcome David Feeney?
You should have seen the long version.
Tonight's second guest was educated by the Loretto sisters on the banks of Lake Wendouree in Ballarat. Ballarat. Very good. Upon graduation, she moved to Canberra for the warmer winters and to continue her studies at ANU. She began working as a union organiser for APESMA before becoming a national organiser for the ALP and working on the 2010 and 2013 federal election campaigns. No, she didn't. She doesn't.
Neither of those.
She's not claiming that one. The following year, she returned home to Victoria to become the Deputy Field Director for Victorian Labor at the 2014 state election. Following the successful election campaign, she was stolen by the Premier's office, despite the then Victorian Assistant Secretary encouraging her to pursue a career as the leader of the unprecedented grassroots political movement Community Action Network.
Stephen has never forgiven Lissy.
For the first 2 years at One Treasury Place, no one knew exactly what she did there, nor would she tell them what she did there. In 2016, she came out of the shadows and was appointed the Deputy Chief of Staff to Daniel Andrews, overseeing the communications and campaign strategy for the government. There is no documentary evidence of this, but those who were there will tell you that she was central to the successive slides of 2018 and 2022 state election campaigns, and she's now a managing partner at FMRS Advisory. Would you please welcome Jessie McCrone? All right, now we've got the formalities out of the way, let's get down to the celebration. Let's just recap, if you haven't remembered what the election result was. Labor, very good. Labor ended up, at this point in time anyway, on a primary of 34.6%, with a 2% swing to us on primary. The Libs had a 3.9% swing against us on the primary, taking them down to 31.8. The Greens sat pat and are stuck on 12.2, and the rest you can see there. In terms of a two-party preferred, there was a 2.8% swing to Labor, taking us up to 55 on the nose, or that's a change there, it's 55.5, and the Tories down to 44 and a bit. Labor has won a record number of 16 seats that changed on the election. That takes us to 94, our highest total ever in the history of our federation of the party. And it's the lowest for the Liberals since their formation in the 1940s. It also saw the result of two party leaders losing their own seats. And women now comprise 57% of the Parliamentary Labor caucus, up from 52 in the previous term. An absolutely outstanding result for the Labor Party. So my first question is to David. Way back early in December and January this year on the podcasts, you and I were a little bit down about federal Labor's prospects heading into this election season. And were openly worried about it. I remember getting a message from a federal caucus member who's a regular listener to the pod, messaged me when they were about to listen to the March episode of the Feeney Files and said, "I'm about to take my monthly medicine from you two." Fast forward to tonight. Here we are celebrating this historic victory. What do you think was at the heart of the change of fortunes for Labor?
Well, I think if you cast your mind back to the sort of 12 months preceding January of 2025, we saw federal Labor slowly but inexorably deflate, and the standing of Prime Minister Albanese slowly deflate. And as I've said on the pod many times, I think the government was sort of buffeted by international events, and it showed it that it was just incapable of making its own political weather. It was just dancing to issues not of its own design. And on those rare occasions where it did try and seize the initiative, it was just wrecked by fate. So like a budget surplus was trumped by Senator Payman ratting on the Labor Party. No, things just happened that sort of threw us off course. And so through a combination of not being able to make our own political weather and ill fortune, by the time we got to January 2025, we really did have a government that had absolutely no momentum, and an opposition that had successfully harvested grievance politics for a long time. And there was this kind of Trump gestalt going on that, now's the time to work against woke politics, and, the left is struggling in Europe, the left is struggling in the United States. Being Trump adjacent was sexy for about 5 minutes in January. And so there was a moment there where, in fact, and I think even Dunn, blinking into the lights of his fate, remembers this moment where it looked close. And we were frustrated, you'll remember, about, what the hell are we doing having a close election with these numpties at the end of our first term when we should be in our salad days as a government. So we were frustrated. I was frustrated. And we were on the eve of a close election with a government that seemingly had no momentum.
So take us to the campaign, Jessie. What did you see from the Labor Party and also the Liberal or the coalition campaigns that we saw this shift?
Well, that was a phenomenal introduction to where I was going to... It's like you were looking at my notes and be like, that's brilliant.
It's where all my ideas come from. You should wait till my next point.
No, I just mean that the election was up for grabs. There's no doubt about it that we went into a campaign period where Labor was trailing, poor polling. The Prime Minister had a personal approval rating of -21. Certainly at some point. The Voice had been this unmitigated disaster, and cost of living was a real challenge. And there was this overwhelming feeling, well described on a podcast that I listened to, about that we were heading in the wrong direction. And then we got to the election campaign, and I think Paul Erickson has mentioned this in his speech at the press club. Voters were open to hearing from both sides. All of the research that came out of the campaign suggests that voters actually took a good look. And at the point that they took a look, the Liberals completely faltered and Labor did just about everything right. So cost of living, Labor turned cost of living into a services argument, which was absolutely the right way. It wasn't a sugar hit. Here's your, there were little things like the tax cuts, but it wasn't, I'm going to save you $1,200 on your, what we saw at Queensland Labor, that wasn't the approach they took. They said, let's turn cost of living into a services argument, which they had done a reasonable job of during the government to that point, and then in the campaign. The campaign theme was competence, stability. There was no overreach. They weren't trying to do big, crazy things. At no stage did Albanese get dragged into the cultural debate during the campaign period. There was a concern about how we deal with the culture wars. It was managed very well. And they made Australians feel like we weren't there yet. Not everything's perfect, but we are turning a corner. And you can thank Labor for that and don't interrupt that progress. But at the same time, they had a look at the Liberal Party and their policy, their pre-selection, and the actual process of their politics were a disaster. Completely unprepared on every one of those fronts. Just looking even at the nuclear policy, it was, when it first was announced, I was like, this is, the Libs are setting the agenda here. They're taking a energy plan to the population. It's bold, but at least it looks like Dutton's fighting for something. And I think I said at the time that they at least looked like they were leading debates. And to David's point earlier,
they could have made a thing out of it, right? They could have said, this is part of Australia's road to zero emissions. This is manufacturing jobs. This is enlivening jobs in regional centres. Like, there was a package to put around it. They'd done all the hard yards of saying we're going to have it and here it is. And here's the suburb we're going to build it in. Yeah. Like, if you're going to do all that, you may as well turn up for
absolutely
some of the
and
process.
Actually have the fight. Their pre-selections were clearly a disaster. They're unvetted candidates, and that played out terribly for them in the campaign. But just the process of their politics, and when I say that, I mean the actual political decision-making between HQ and the leader's office clearly was an unmitigated disaster. They couldn't work out whether Dutton was Trump light, tough guy, or a suburban dad in a cardigan. Like, it was this sort of flip-flop, and then they're backing in, changing the national curriculum to deal with wokeness, and then the next day they're not. And their shadow ministry are undermining policy as they go. The whole thing was entirely undercooked. It felt like they looked at the Voice and went, this is going to happen for us, and we don't have to do anything about it. We can ride that politics of grievance to the end. And I think that mixed messaging from about Dutton absolutely undermined any authenticity they have, and the voters just looked at that and went, we're not going with the panic button, we're going with the plan. And that's what they did. And I think that if you have a look at since 2007, when we have changed governments, it has broadly been when the incumbents have been such a disaster that we've changed. That is what the Liberals were expecting this time around, and Labor just did not let them have it.
I want to ask you about the sequencing of the Liberal campaign policy announcements. The theory coming out of the post-election analysis is that Liberal CHQ thought that Albanese had such a bad 2024, just constantly throwing up on himself. Why interrupt him while he continues to do that? They expect him to do that in 2025, and so they just didn't bring things out. And the timing of policies is an important thing, and we've seen some changes over the years in state and federal elections about when you start to drop your big announcements. I just want to get your reflections on the timing of both campaigns and when they brought out their signature policy announcements.
So there's a conventional wisdom if you're in the opposition about how you construct a re-election or an election campaign. The first year you have to accept that the government wasn't great and that's why you got rid of us, and we accept that, and we didn't do some great things. Abbott actually did a good job of that after they lost in 2007. It was very clear that work choices was a disaster idea, blah, blah, blah. He kind of rid himself of some of the baggage of the former government. Dutton didn't. I think that there was a space for him on health to sort of say we shouldn't have done the co-payments and all of those sort of things. It didn't feel like there was much of an apology tour as a belting of Scott Morrison for being every minister. That felt how the first year went. The second year is when you're supposed to just tear down the government. Any opportunity, you just rip them apart. They were okay at that. They did that reasonably well. The third year is supposed to be about the agenda that you are taking. And apart from nuclear, it felt like they get caught up in the second year and thought, we're doing such a good job of ripping them apart. We don't need the third bit. You always need the third bit. You always need to have something else to offer. Like, even in 2013, where we were being absolutely decimated, Tony Abbott had another agenda. Like, he had three things that he kept repeating. You need that. And so I think that they didn't have a policy agenda. I don't think Labor's campaign was perfect. I know that we all have heard it is, but no campaign can be. I think that 2016 was a phenomenal campaign for the Labor Party, and we didn't stop and consider whether everything we took to 2016 should be taken to 2019, and that hurt us in 19. So I am going to say I do think that there could have been some policy announcements earlier from the Labor Party, but I do think we were early enough to get out there and actually sell the policies.
Yeah, I think our policies came out, and we might have sort of wondered at them at the time, but what each of them was doing was slowly and inexorably building up a story about how the government is trying on cost of living, and they're trying to fix it. I guess the other thing is, which I think flows from what you were saying, Jessie, is that, and we've talked about this before too, is I do think the Coalition and the Liberal Party in particular are suffering from a vicious brain drain, and that they just don't have the wit in their ranks that they need. And we've sort of seen this, there's been this exodus from their ranks in 2019 when they thought they were going to lose, and then in 2022 when they, did lose, and the Morrison government led them to defeat. And they've now got to the point, haven't they, where, some of their brighter new ones have just been taken out. And we're now kind of left with Dumb and Dumber. And what we now see is this is not just a problem transfixing their parliamentary party, but their organisational wings and their staffers are stupid too. And it's not just they're not just stupid because they're Tories, although that doesn't help. But because politics has become the difficult, unattractive lifestyle that it is. And so only people who are half insane and possessed of the vocation want to do it, which is all of us. Whereas those who are dedicated to personal advancement and enrichment, the Liberal Party, don't want to do it. And so I think they have a systemic problem in their ranks. They're getting too dumb for politics.
They have gone from the land and gentry party to failed small business owners.
Well, now they just want to stay on their estates.
Yeah.
So I went to an event a week ago, and I won't say who the person was. It was a Tory, a Victorian Tory, and their take on what happened was interesting. I actually keen to get your thoughts on this, Dave, because they basically were asked this question: Why did Labor win and why did the coalition lose? And they said, political campaigns are about brand identity, and if you can campaign on your identity, then you're more likely to win. And Labor were able to campaign on their brand identity, which is health and education, and we weren't able to campaign on ours, which is national security and the economy. And also the second reason is the Labor Party ran a nasty negative campaign against us on health. And that was it. That was kind of the take. Now, there are elements of truth in that, but I don't think that's the whole story. And I just wonder...
No, well, if you take Medicare, for instance, like one of their learnings in recent years should have been, we really need to inoculate ourselves. Like, okay, taken down by a Mediscare once is embarrassing, but to let it happen every 3 years, you think someone's going to put their hand up at a meeting and say, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we do something here about this Medicare problem? So they really need to do some inoculation on it. And I think John Howard kind of reached that realisation at the end of his career, but forgot to tell the kids. So I think they have to do some inoculation on that. They haven't. It's mystifying. And as for the sort of branding, again, it goes back to something Jessie said, which is that their shadow ministry just didn't do the work. If you want to create the political weather so that you're having a conversation based around economics and defence, for instance, then you need the poor old shadow ministers to turn up to work and come up with a clue, don't you? And what we saw with Angus Taylor was...
He's very good looking.
He's got great hair.
He's really good looking.
He's got great hair.
I don't hear what he says. He's so good looking.
He's great hair. And long may that hair last.
He's got great hair.
His next idea will be his first. So, and so what we've got with, and in defence, defence is my personal policy peccadillo, and I was affronted by their defence policy. I thought I saw the great right wing of politics riding out of the sunset at the end of the campaign with their defence policy. Thought, this is going to be exciting. And they stand up, and what is it? It's $21 billion. We're not sure how we're coming up with it, and we can't tell you yet what we're spending it on. Oh, for fuck's sake. So whether it be defence or economic credentials, these guys weren't trying. Like, this is the dog ate my homework stuff. And whereas Labor, knowing how down it was and how frustrated it deservedly should be about had done all of its work, had done all of its homework, and had a plan for how to dominate the political conversation over the course of the campaign. So,
which actually included the economy. Like, the idea that the economy was not part of this campaign is just a fantasy. The Liberals did not have a narrative on that.
Well, in fact, Brandis tells a lovely story, doesn't he, about how handing out on election day, and the Labor person was saying, vote Labor for lower taxes, vote Labor for lower taxes, and George said his little heart broke. And how did they get into that position? Angus, the hair, wasn't it?
So good looking. So good looking. Jessie, I want another hot take that came out of the campaign, where a lot of Tories in the sort of the commentary world, it's kind of thrown had to throw in a bit of a tanty, was this conversation about preferences for minor parties. The only reason why the Labor Party won was because of preference for minor parties, not understanding that we live in a compulsory preferential voting system since 1918. What did you make of this? Is this like some way of trying to delegitimise Labor's victory, or the Greens?
Stephen, that's exactly what it is.
I know that was a softball. I know.
So, no one was saying this when Clive Palmer essentially delivered the 2019 campaign to the Tories. Like, he did a phenomenal job of shifting votes to them, and that's part of it. That's how it works. I would say...
Not in Melbourne, though. There it was mysterious dark forces working in the shadows.
Like, I would say that the same people that are complaining about preferences right now are the same people that during a minority government when the Greens had part of the balance of power were like, we cannot be held hostage by these extremist views from the fringes. Well, that's entirely what will happen if we get rid of preferential voting. The whole point of preferential voting is to have the politicians we all least hate. Like, that is the point, and that is how it should be. It keeps a broader, more representative group of people into the parliament. It means you are less likely to be held hostage by small interest groups, and you will not hear Labor complaining about preferential voting when the Greens beat us or when the Libs win.
Well, and to completely agree with you, like, take a look at US politics, for instance, where, Christian fundamentalists, for instance, which has always been the spectre and scourge of progressives looking aghast from overseas into American politics. Well, in Australia, those groups have infinitely less cachet because they are not such a large proportion of the voters. They are only representative of their numbers in the population. Whereas, so these groups that can organise themselves to vote end up with a disproportionate say, and that's not always a welcome thing.
It's a disaster.
I can't believe we've gone 27 minutes and not talked about the Greens, so let's do that now.
I feel like I've tried.
Yeah, I know.
I got covered a bit in the opening. Too.
Yeah, well, no, but let's fucking get stuck into them now. So by the end of 2022, let me paint a bad picture for us all here in this room. The Greens had 4 federal seats, 4 in the Victorian Parliament, 3 in the New South Wales Parliament, 2 in the Queensland Parliament. They were up and about. They were walking tall.
To their own detriment.
And ready to expand their territory. They were like, Wills, that's going. McNamara, that's going. Fremantle, the redistribution of Melbourne, the seat of Melbourne. They said, yeah, no, we're happy. We'll take South Yarra. That's fine. We're happy with that.
Yeah, in fact, Bant nominated that he was going to win 8 seats this election, and then, because he can't count, named 9.
Yeah. Yeah. And old mate Max Chandler Mathers the third. Good, that's fine. Done that YouTube podcast where, like, in 17 years, they were going to be the only progressive party in Australian politics.
No, they were going to be the government.
Yeah, I am the government. Sorry, yeah, right. Anyway, fast forward to where we are right now. They lost 1 seat in the Queensland parliamentary elections last year. They lost a seat in the Victorian Parliament at a by-election. They lost Griffith, Brisbane, Melbourne, failed to win Wills and McNamara, hung on in Ryan by 769 votes in the difference between coming second and third between Labor and the Greens, lost their leader, crippled with internal division, have demonstrated absolutely no ability for self-reflection and contrition. David Feeney, how much fun have you had over the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's been hard, hasn't it? I mean, when the Melbourne count was unfolding, I could not just... I was like a cat on a hot roof. I was like, so excited. And just excuse me while I refresh my AEC, because I haven't checked it for 10 minutes. And I thought I've complained about this a lot, and why should tonight be any different? On Saturday night, you have to hear from the loser leader and then the victorious leader. And there are rituals around that. And the Greens, this sort of fraud party, who spend 33 days insisting they should be included in the debates, suddenly spend Saturday night explaining to people, well, we're just a minor party, we don't have to explain what happened. And so on election night, they completely evade. We're all sitting there like vampires wanting to watch them bleed on stage. Well, we didn't win anything, and all of our predictions were wrong, and none of our scrutineers know what happened. But we don't get the satisfaction of that because they run back into their burrows. And then this time, that didn't wreck Saturday night for me, but it took a little bit of joy. But then you wait until Tuesday or Wednesday for them to pop out and show their face. And of course, what did we get on this occasion? It was a conspiracy. I did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong. Everything we did was right. The voters don't fill in ballot papers, but forces do, and those forces were against us. Yeah. And of course, in his analysis, did he say, by the way, I won this seat in 2010 on Liberal Party preferences? No. Good that they don't acknowledge their mistakes, painful that they don't acknowledge their mistakes. It's a bit of both. But as long as that party is completely incapable of serious reflection, we should perhaps be pleased because, of course, in the Labor Party, every time we lose, you have 14 rival factions and 3 reports. And you can run, but you can't hide. Where in their party, there just doesn't seem to be any assessment at all.
The thing I want to talk about it is that our party's been around for 140 years. We've lost elections. We've gone through pain. And I do distinctly remember, and I actually want to check the audience because Jessie and I were talking about this during the week, and I can't remember what election it was. And some folks in the room may remember the Imperial Hotel on an election night. We lost. I feel like it was the federal election 2013. After it was like drinks we'd all organised.
I'm seeing nodding.
It's 2013, right? We'd organised drinks. We'd all come from our various respective campaign parties to have drinks at the Imperial, and the Greens came in and gloated. Like, they all just came running in. It was the closest you'll ever get to sort of like football hooliganism in politics. It was like, what the fuck's going on here, And they all came in and really, really gloated. I feel like...
Because the golden rule is the Greens only really do well when we do badly.
Yeah.
Which they're saying at the moment. Like, their whole excuse is, because I've been watching religiously all of the videos they're sending out to their people about what you have to remember here is we didn't do poorly. It's just the Liberal Party did poorly, which means that the Labor Party did well. And I'm like, but you were accepting that the Libs have to do well for you to do well.
Yeah. Mao Zedong would never have stopped at something like that, would he? Like, what are these guys? They're not even serious.
No. And I took away from... I thought about that night. It was pretty shit, right? We lost government and, fair enough. You can come in here and you want to brag. You got bragging rights. So we've accepted our medicine from time to time when we lose elections because we've lost a lot over the years. And for the fact that I went, this election, you've never lost an election before. You've never had 75% of your House of Representative caucus just disappear overnight. Like, you're shit at losing and watching not just the sort of the keyboard warriors on social media, but actually their leader not be able to concede defeat for so long, said to me...
Or ever.
Yeah. Well, has he done it?
Well, he's considered... But this is still a great result for the Greens and we're doing very well.
No, it was Trump-esque. The whole thing was, we do not accept the outcome of this result.
Yeah, they'll have their own Bitcoin soon.
What did you say? All right. Are we done sticking the boot in the Greens, I think? Yeah. Oh, a bit more. I don't know.
I do note that you didn't point out that the tea leaves here were the Melbourne council election.
What a campaign. What a campaign. What a campaign director.
I can't talk about it enough. There's nothing more interesting than Victorian municipal politics.
But I will say, we thought they were going to get 18% of the vote.
Yeah, we did.
And what did they get?
Not that much.
No,
anyway.
they only got one councillor.
Can I make one vaguely serious point, though, which is obviously after the Green Concave had its meeting and came out with Larissa as the mysteriously elected person who would lead them forth. And, you know, they don't reveal who ran or what happened or who, it's just...
Consensus.
But her election might represent something of a change direction for the Greens, to which Labor should be alert, which is the Greens might start talking about the environment again, where they have some cachet. Once they sort of drift off terrorism, economics and CFMEU rallies, they might become a bit more potent as a political force. So, and she is a very presentable and articulate leader. She's not quite the angry ant that Adam Bant is. So unfortunately, although the flogging they've received is excellent and well deserved, they're down but not out, and they might.
They're not going to go the way of the Democrats?
I don't. No, they need a split, I think, for that to happen.
Give it time.
Well, Lydia's trying.
Okay, let's. I want to talk about the future. And
I want to revel in the election.
Yeah, no, we've got to. No, we've got to. We need to talk to the future because we've got other people waiting in the wings to come out and talk as well. Keep an eye on the time here. Let's talk about the second Albanese government, which is a lovely thing to say. And we're amongst friends here, and I think it's safe to say that many of us expected more from the first term. It's been described by some as timid. And at times reactive and not proactive, subpar political judgment, poor communication.
So that's harsh, Stephen.
It was said on our podcast. It's called courage, people.
You turned the whole thing around.
Yeah. However, watching as an outsider watching their last government, I've gone, I've fucking seen this movie before. It's the Rudd Gillard government all over again, and I don't want to be there without the midnight coups, obviously. But on the positive side, we've had so many examples of so many good state Labor governments across the country that you could look at that and go, what can we be like that? So Jessie, I'm thinking,
I wonder what I'm going to say.
What government would you like to be, and what government do you think they want to be?
Well, Stephen, it's going to surprise no one that I want them to be the Andrews Labor government from 2014 to 2019.
Is it because you're wearing that Victorian jumper?
Because I'm wearing the Victorian jumper. I don't think that is something they're going to do. I think that there is I think there is a cultural difference about the federal party than there is in the state party. And I've thought this for quite a while. I think that the 2010 to 13 experience has been quite informative for anyone, and I was one of them, who were either a federal staffer at the time or an MP, and it has embedded certain thoughts in our mind about operating and how things work that haven't necessarily got into the bloodstreams of state politics. I remember when I came into state politics and finding that we just sent things to caucus. Wild. Like that was, we just trusted them with all of this information. A mistake. It was a whole new world when I came in. So I think that the 2010-13 has kind of given us this different way of thinking, and I do think that a lot of people who were around then have carried that with them. I then think it was reinforced when we lost in 2019 about what the public will accept from Labor governments. I don't necessarily subscribe to the view that we need to be small target to win. But I am not surprised that a lot of federal people have taken that out of the experience for the last 15 years. So when you ask what kind of government do you think they're going to be, I think that they're probably modelling themselves on a McGowan, early Malinowskis government that is, and arguably early Daniel Andrews government. Like, people kind of forget that the first couple of years of that government, we were very cautious about a bunch of things. The 2018 victory kind of, we were off.
Let's get low.
But I think that they are going to look at those governments and like they're good models. What I hope they take from those governments, and I imagine David's going to agree with this, is one of the successes of both of those governments is a clear central message, a very clear way of operating in terms of what you care about and what you don't, the fights you're prepared to pick, the ones that you aren't, and everyone singing from the same song sheet. So that I think WA and South Australia is kind of where they will model themselves.
David, I want to ask you a question about the cabinet reshuffle. That was sort of the first news that broke after the glorious victory that we had. Do you think that Mark Dreyfus and Ed Husic were hard done by?
So she gets the nice, expansive question. And then I get to talk about all the blood on the floor. Great. Okay. Well, the first thing about that story is I was very impressed that the New South Wales right faction was able to position itself as a victim needing empathy in the internal affairs of the Australian Labor Party. Because, of course, if you look up cruelty in the dictionary, there's photos of Barry Unsworth and Leo McClay, and anyway, here they were.
Graham Richardson.
Here they were. I would never say a bad thing.
I know you won't, so I will.
Because you just never know where he is. So the New South Wales right, firstly, managed to position themselves here as the empathetic faction being taken down by the Victorian right. So, of course, that was the first bit of remarkable PR spin. The second thing was Ed Husic, who I know well, like very much. Impossible not to like Ed. Was out there basically saying, you know, Richard Marles and the Victorian right took me down as a minister. And I was just scratching my head thinking, well, hang on a minute. The New South Wales right didn't select you as one of its slate for the ministry. So didn't you get done over internally? Actually, like, how do we get the murder rap for this? They've got 5 ministers and you didn't get to be one of the 5.
Because they will select whether he goes back in. That's why they didn't call the rap from him.
But I'm saying in terms of PR, like now, you know, obviously Australian journalists are of the highest standard and saw straight through this. Not for a second.
What we're going to do now is we're going to introduce our new guest. We're 14 minutes behind schedule, just letting everyone know that, and you as well, because we time keep here in Social Democratic. I want to introduce our next two guests, starting with our first guest, who was educated by the Presentation Sisters. Who was educated by the Presentation Sisters that went, oh?
Are we all Catholic refugees?
Yeah. In Melbourne's Mornington Peninsula, straight out of high school, she interned at the Australian Associated Press, Channel 9 and Channel 10. She jagged her first paid gig as a production assistant at Sky News for failed 1998 NUS Victorian presidential candidate for Left Alliance, Patricia Karvelis. Let's not forget that. Count, Patricia, count. She got a cadetship at the AAP and she covered the 2018 Victorian State poll. In 2019, she was appointed full-time journalist at AAP covering Victorian politics. During COVID, she built a strong reputation as a lone journalist providing critical information to readers at a time when Victorians were craving non-biased coverage. Yeah, fucking know, that deserves a clap. For the past 3 years, she's been the state reporter for The Guardian, and she's now one of the most senior reporters for the Victorian Press Gallery. Would you please welcome to the stage Benita Kolovos. It's also bring your own chair night at Socially Democratic. And our other guest refuses to tell me what school he went to.
It was Rotorua High School.
Hey! But I can tell you he was born and raised in the land of the long white clouds. He too developed a craft for campaigns and student politics at Victoria University in Wellington. on top of the hill. His first gig was working for Grant Robinson in his electoral office, running his leadership campaign for the Labor Party. Being a member of the New Zealand Labor Party in the 2010s, it was pretty grim, and he realised that he needed to become an economic and political refugee and move to Australia to learn how to win campaigns. I wish I'd turned that page quicker. And I can't find the page. There we go. He completed his apprenticeship leading online digital recruitment campaigns for United Voice and the CFMEU. He returned home to work for the newly elected Labor Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern as her senior campaign advisor, and was central in her online strategy that delivered the biggest election victory for Labor in the MMP era. He returned home to work for Daniel Andrews in the digital director role and was a part of the 2022 state election campaign victory. He now runs his own successful digital consultancy firm called Good to Go. Would you please welcome to the stage Reid Fleming. And like a good organiser, he's recruited people to come here tonight to celebrate your attendance. Good job by you, Reid.
We call it branch stacking.
Benita, to you first. In your time as a reporter, you've spent a bit of time on the campaign bus, as well as being situated in actual electorates, doing coverage in a more detailed way. And I just kind of want to get a sense from you about the pros and cons of doing both and how you actually can report to your readership about what's going on in this campaign.
See, initially I was going to say that the bus is the worst place to be, but then I was thinking about it a little and decided actually it's good. It serves a purpose, right? One purpose is you get to hang out with your friends for many weeks and, hang out every night and do fun things together. But you can kind of closely follow the leader. You get a sense of, how they're travelling, how the people around them feel. Are they nervous? Are they confident? You kind of get a picture that you wouldn't get if you weren't there. I think in this campaign, a big part of it was Peter Dutton just didn't do a lot of media in the lead up. He was on 2GB, he was on Sky, he was very kind of focused on the friendly media, and it was the first time really in a long time that he actually had to face daily press conferences and rigorous questioning every single day about every one of his policies because, previously he could put something out there, not take a lot of questions, maybe not even do a press conference. He wasn't known for doing anything really in Canberra. So I think the bus served a really, strong purpose there, and you could kind of see as the campaign was falling apart, everyone was giving you kind of all the goss on what was happening and how everyone was kind of, the mood was bad. And then he started to retreat away from the bus and he started doing, he was back on Sky every single night in the final week of the campaign.
Peter's at a petrol station again.
Yeah, the petrol stations, right? Because you weren't allowed to ask a single question at the petrol stations. And yeah, I think in that regard, I think it was good. But I do think that there's so much more value out of actually going out to seats and talking to people because when you're on the bus, you get a case study, right? And they're probably a member of either of those parties or probably have...
No, we vet them for that. They can't be a member. They have to be a supporter.
It's like, Albo going to some lady's house and saying, I love you so much. Here's every single baked good I've ever made, ever. So I think, yeah, it's good to actually get out, talk to people, get the vibe. And the vibe that I was seeing on the ground in the seats just wasn't lining up with what I was hearing from colleagues on the buses.
So Dutton should have got off the bus as well, spent a little more time out and about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm not sure, is it here that I've got my video of him spending?
Actually, I was going to ask the question about where were in this election cycle, what innovation did you see from reporters in trying to cover the election differently?
So on the seats, right, and actually getting in depth, The Age had what they called a slow blog. So it only kind of updated once a day, every second day, and reporters were out on the road. I think one of my favourite coverage was Charlotte Grieve from The Age, who was in Bruce and struggling to actually speak to the Liberal candidate there. and, had to do a lot of shoe leather journalism, actually going and knocking on doors, finding his business, knocking on the business's door and finding out that that's not where the business is. And I think it took 21 days for her to actually speak to the Liberal candidate.
Grace, do you have a clip of that?
Hey, Zahid. I'm with The Age. And why have you been dodging my media requests? I've been trying to interview you throughout this campaign to find out how it's been.
Well, the cost of living is a huge issue. We've been talking to voters and getting in touch with them, and cost of living, and meeting as many voters as possible.
What about your wife's business that uses fake reviews? What do you have to say to that?
Crime is a huge issue. Labor has neglected the people of Britain.
But I'm asking about your businesses. There are serious questions. Labor has referred you for an investigation. What do you say about the use of fake reviews, stock images, people addresses who don't know what your companies are? What's going on with that?
People that are concerned is more about cost of living, crime improves, and that's where Labor has neglected, and that's where we will be coming and getting Australia back on track.
But what about you specifically?
Thank you.
Well, at least it was on message to some degree anyway.
More on message than most of their campaign.
Yeah, exactly. The cost of living. I've been knocking on doors. The other thing I want to... Any other reflections on that before I go to the next question?
No, I want to know what a slow blog is. I just thought it was the newspaper.
No, so the slow blog, it's like, we have a live blog where you update it every minute and they're just hungry.
Reporting on the day's news and putting it up, that's the news.
But the thing is, right, there's some things that just don't, I guess, classify or quantify being a standalone story.
Right, yeah.
So all these little random bits of information, tidbits, right? And that's where I thought that was a fantastic idea, because you can roll it all into the slow blog. And, it all stays there for the whole election campaign. So I did think it was clever.
I want to talk about Victoria specifically. You mentioned on the podcast when you came on before the election that there were folks from either the federal or the state Labor Party caucus calling journalists on the bus and when they were in Victoria and backgrounding against the state government. Did anyone know about that? Did you pick up on the podcast? Fucking oath shame. Trying to win here. What impact did that have on folks reporting?
So it was a lot of doom and gloom. It was Victoria's going to be a bloodbath. This is the state where we're going to lose so many seats. We're going to have to roll Jacinta Allen before the next election because she's toxic. I think she was described as, by one commentator, the rotting chicken in the back of the fridge, which is just lovely.
That's KFC, baby. Isn't that just classic, though, of one tier of government desperately trying to blame the other for its travails?
100%. And it's I had a lot of Labor people who were getting really upset in Victoria, state MPs, because they were saying, where have you all been? You've been Victorian members of parliament for such a long time. Why aren't you out there in your communities? Why aren't you promising?
Show us the money.
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
is the big announcement?
Exactly. So I think it was really interesting because you'd get someone that was on the bus and they'd write their little piece about coming to Victoria with Albo, with Dunn, and every single story would have a line going, we're in Victoria, which is toxic for Labor, or, Albo cannot be seen with Jacinta Allen, which I thought was really interesting because in 2022, the exact same thing happened with Andrews. And he actually took longer to get on the campaign with Albo than Jacinta did. And at the time, he started talking about COVID and all these people were sitting there freaking out because Andrews was talking about COVID and it's toxic and no one wants to think about that.
He's definitely not going to increase his majority at the next election.
In 2 months' time.
So when did they start ringing you and backgrounding you that it wasn't so toxic?
No, everyone...
Actually it was really fucking fabulous.
I think at 8 p.m. on election night, which, I thought was really interesting. And it definitely, I think, has shifted the vibe in Victoria. But I think there is a virtue in going out and talking to people. I did not get the sense that people were out to get this government.
Can I ask a question?
No. In a moment. Okay. How often did Brad Batten appear with Peter Dutton in Victoria?
Once. At a petrol station. with no question.
At a petrol station.
At a petrol station, which I, again, think is really interesting because he, even during the campaign, I did an interview with him. I didn't think he'd take an interview request during the middle of a federal election. And Brad Batten started saying, you know what, me and Peter Dutton, we aren't similar at all. We're very different people and we have very different life experiences.
Well, that's a worry. That's just
I mean
Brad
no
Batten
harm
is
to your
quite
planet.
clever.
I mean no harm to your planet.
I'm a bit worried if he's able to divine that during the election campaign.
I thought it was smart. I thought it was clever. And he said, I'm not into nuclear. I'm into, I think it was gas, lots of drilling. But I thought that was quite telling that not only did he not appear with him, he came out saying, we're very different.
Yeah. Mr. Fleming.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Obviously a huge victory for Labor, and I'm really interested in the work that was done in the digital space. I just feel like I'd gone on sort of the Labor Party platform, various social media platforms, trying to grab what is the key piece, like the key ad piece that they were just trying to pump out everywhere, the same creative over and over and over. Found it hard to find. What did you see from what was coming out of the creative team in terms of their positive message?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big stories of the campaign is that it wasn't one where there was the single, key TVC that was, rolled out over and over again and everything kind of flowed from that. It was the most digital, maybe not a digital-led campaign, but the most digital campaign that I think we've seen from Labor. And part of that was their approach of building on the approach in 2022 of carving off WA and having all of the creative made by one agency, by Moss Group. They built on that, and in this election they had 3 agencies, and they carved off different geographies and different parts of the campaign creative. It broke down with Moss Group, again, doing WA, as well as the local seat campaign, so all of the localised creative for candidates in Victoria, Tasmania and Queensland. Campaign Edge made the central kind of positive piece that we saw come out at the start of the campaign with Albo kind of rattling off the achievements of the government and where we'd go next, as well as doing the local campaigns in New South Wales, Northern Territory and South Australia. And then Shannon's doing the Greens seats.
That seems to have been effective.
Yeah, I'd be popping that one on the on the website. It meant that they two things. They had different teams, plugged in depth on the research and the strategy and the different messages they needed to roll out for those different geographies and different audiences. It also just meant they had a huge amount of additional capacity in the advertising team. And the result of that was, I'm told they had 4,500 individual executions of ads that rolled out across TV and digital, which is huge, massive. And so it meant they were able to have kind of super localised positive and negative messages. So if you were living in a target seat, you would have been seeing positive messages, going to Labor's central message from your local Labor MP, as well as a localised version of the central negative, talking about your local Liberal landlord candidate. And that is a real ad that they ran. I'm not sure why in Kooyong, but someone was having fun in Docklands. And the numbers back it up. Labor spent 3 times as much on YouTube in this campaign compared to 2022. And so I think we've found in this campaign, the big thing that's changed, we've found this kind of new normal. It's no longer the case that there's one central TVC and everything, all the creative for the campaign is attached to that. It's also no longer the case, of what was in vogue in the early 2000s, kind of the Barack Obama kind of obsession with micro-targeting. That is over now as well. And we've kind of found this sensible centre, as Susan Lane may say.
So, looking at the Tories, the content they were punching out, it it was very, very negative, and I really couldn't find any sort of positive message coming from them. I mean, did that even exist in this campaign?
No, I think that's another big story, is that they not only did they run a incredibly negative campaign, it was also just weird. In campaigns, in talking about advertising, you're always talking about the split, the positive-negative split, and what percentage of the creative we're putting out, or the impressions we're putting out, are on negative creative versus positive creative. I understand that Labor's campaign, it shook out at about 60-40, 60% negative, 40% positive in the final parts of the campaign. So I was interested. I went and looked at the Liberal version of that. I had the pleasure of going through each one of their ads they ran online. Just 1 in 5 in the last couple of weeks were positive, so 80% negative.
How about that one where it was the TV ad where Peter Dunn was like, "Hi, I'm Peter." And he was smiling.
the one piece of footage they had of him ever smiling. But it gets worse than that. Labor had a focused message. It had 4,500 pieces of credit, but it was focused. It was always about that Peter Dutton, when he was health minister, was voted the worst health minister in the history of Australia, and fuck knows how much nuclear is going to cost us, and therefore they're going to have to cut everything.
He cuts, you pay.
Exactly. For the Liberals, I went through it. Their negative messages in the final week included the Voice, immigration, the deficit, the CFMEU, listing which members were running in marginal seats were members of the CFMEU. Labor potentially doing a deal with the Greens, power bills, local roads, tax increases, offshore wind, small business insolvencies, and Labor's record building houses, which was bizarrely portrayed Albo as a muppet.
I don't mean to interpose, but you've left out the big one, the killer. Welcome to country, haven't you? Like, they spent 3 days of their last week talking about welcome to country and setting the country on fire. Not. Yeah.
Someone was more sensible in the advertising team, because they never placed that as ads. But on organic, that was certainly making an appearance. And so it meant that if the Libs were running 20 pieces of creative into a seat, they had about 20 different messages. And Labor could not be more different from that. They were running far more creative, but it was extremely focused. They knew what they were talking about, and they stuck to it. And the Liberals were not capable of doing that.
Where was the money being spent?
They were also having to fight on more fronts than Labor were, and the number of seats they were fighting against, they were spreading their message, whatever it was, thinly as well.
Not minor parties, but third-party groups that sort of play around in this space, particularly in digital. Oh, look at this. Look at this. Ben Foster. 3 votes, Ben Foster. Oh, don't spill my martini.
Oh, right.
There you go, David. Dirty, like it.
Reed's sick, so he doesn't get it. Sorry.
Poor Reed. I know you're doing a terrific job here. Third-party kind of groups. Where were they hanging out? Where were they spending their money? And what were they talking about?
I realise I'm about to say this is the third big story of the campaign. I think that's a big story of the campaign. So talk about spending. There was about $69 million spent on digital advertising this campaign. Labor comes out on top, spending about 13.5. The Libs and Trumpeter Patriots spent about the same, about $10 million each on digital. Greens, you can see, they only had to run in far fewer seats, but they spent far less, about 1.3 million online. But yeah, the under the radar, the third party kind of interest campaigns, I think is a big and kind of underreported on story. You've got the big ones that people know about, the Advance Australia, Climate 200. But the next kind of tier, and there's 20 or so groups that were spending upwards of $100,000, and each of those might only be playing in a handful of seats each, and overwhelmingly they were anti-liberal. So there was amongst that, the 20 or so advertisers, there was about $7 million spent, and 3 to 1 it was being spent on anti-coalition content, and overwhelmingly it was anti-nuclear. Meanwhile, the Liberals didn't post a single ad about their most expensive policy since late November last year.
They did not sell it.
Did not talk about it whatsoever, and everybody else was talking about it for them. And so there were, the Climate Action Network, Liberals Against Nuclear, the Clean Energy Council, RE Alliance.
They all sound like very legitimate organisations that were
I was going to say,
they were definitely established before the campaign.
Are you a director of any of them?
Liberals Against Nuclear.
They spent a lot of money.
Established 1825.
Met here.
The Conservation Foundation, Solutions for Climate Australia. Legit groups. I suspect you've never heard of them before, and if you didn't live in a marginal seat, you probably never did hear about them. But we shouldn't
underestimate. And you will never hear from them again.
Ever, yeah. Well, some of them have already deleted their pages. They now no longer exist, having dropped 150k into 2 seats.
Which is amazing. The community fundraising they were able to do to get that together. Amazing.
I don't think we should underestimate the impact of that. The Liberals left this void for people to talk about their nuclear policy for them, and people very much, filled that vacuum with, the creative. It was pretty good. It was overwhelmingly all about nuclear. So there was this discipline and focus on nuclear. They were pretty sharp attack ads, and they were very, very targeted.
Yeah.
In some of these cases, they were only targeting in 1 or 2 seats, and dropping 150k is meaningful spend.
And you know what seats? I mean, I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, these sound like teal fronts. Teal fronts running down the Liberal Party in an eastern... But is that right or not?
No, I think some of them were definitely in Labor Green. Maybe not the nuclear spending ones, but some of those groups I listed were definitely in Labor Green seats and not coming out for us. No, the eastern suburbs of Melbourne... the typical marginal seat list you would have seen. Yeah.
You started to touch on content, and I'm interested in terms of creative, what you saw coming out of the campaign that's worth highlighting. I know that was often our political, our MPs can be a little bit wooden in their social media content. But
how so?
Well,
I thought a better word for it was beige.
Yeah,
beige.
That's very polite.
And we're also bored of politicians being kind of sanded down and inoffensive. And it's got to the point where it's literally a parody of itself.
It's Kim Il-jong pointing at things. That's how bad it's got.
It's shit.
Pleased to be here.
I was going to do like a Gen Z poll in the room, but who am I kidding? So let's try a millennial poll, or just gays. Who hands up? Who's familiar with the independent Senate candidate in Victoria, Belinda Greed?
Only because you keep liking it, so it appears in my feed.
Some fans. I think I've got a video here.
I love her so much.
Labor's cost of living crisis is putting a real strain on our hard-working Aussie families. If elected, I propose to completely cut the petrol tax, saving you up to $100 every time you hit the pump. So you can guzzle until you've got your fill.
So Belinda Greed ran a full campaign. It was a thing of beauty. She got a telling off from the AEC because she initially came out as a Liberal Party candidate.
Yeah, her stuff at the start was pretty. I'm like, is this a story?
Yeah. It turns out it's an offence to impersonate a candidate, and she got a telling off for that. She confronted Amelia Hamer at pre-poll in Kooyong, like as if they needed more shit going down in Kooyong.
She got into a fight with Fiona Patten as well. Yeah.
Great.
Interesting.
And then she threw a election night party. She had a lot of fun. But to me, it highlighted just how beige political content has become on social media, that a drag queen can do it better than real politicians. So I'm going to label it the greed strategy now. So dull. But there are some there are some kind of green shoots.
Italian brain rot. I really enjoy the Italian brain rot content from Paul Erickson.
You mean Labor's bilingual strategy? I think there's some good examples of candidates doing it well. I think that one of the biggest single change we've seen because of TikTok and Reels is you can't fake it anymore. You have to be in the videos as the candidate, and authenticity is key. And if you're not willing to be yourself and present yourself and engage with people genuinely, then you're doing the greed strategy. Dan Ripcioli is doing it. He's just being himself and nailing it. I think this is
If you've ever been hit in the head by a footy or broken a bone, get down to the urgent care clinic near you. All you need is your Medicare card. We've delivered over 80 Medicare urgent care clinics, and there's 50 more to come. Oh, Peter, where's that beer you promised me?
Authorised by Dan Ripcioli, ALP, Cessnock.
There's another one as well.
People in this region, kids and grandkids coming through, the Labor Party will have those kids and grandkids lining up at dog queues outside the local Centrelink office.
This is bullshit. This bloke's a dead set grub. He flies in, slags us off, then disappears without sticking around to face the music. I'm sick of it, and I reckon the locals here are too. This is the best part of the country, full of hard workers and proud communities. We're not taking lectures for some out-of-touch millionaire blow-in from Queensland who wouldn't even last a day in a Hunter job site. We deserve better in the Hunter, and Peter Dutton, you're an absolute disgrace.
Tell us what you really think.
That was the censored version.
There's more of that.
Is that it? That's fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much to both of you. Okay, we are moving along. We're now at the stage where we're in the final stretch of the podcast.
Only 1 hour to go.
But we're at the fun part, which is the categories.
We've all got notes.
We've all got our cards out.
Yeah, exactly.
There were so many. I had to write them down.
So much things happened that we need to cover off. Obviously, we're going to begin with Tori with a typewriter. Sorry, categories. You've all listened to the show, right? You know we do these categories at the end? Yeah, okay, right. Good. It's just a way of us trying to fit things
Tattooed onto
in.
your heart.
Good. Yeah. Starting with Tori with the typewriter, which is a category we've had for a number of years. And I want to give the opening pitch to our journalist on the stage here to let us know, do you have a Tori with a typewriter?
I do. It was really hard to pick one. It was coming from the same person. Have we got a video of it? Yeah.
For the first time in my journalistic career, I'm going to offer a pre-election editorial endorsing one side of politics. Our country needs strong leadership, a Prime Minister prepared to defend what we stand for as a nation and govern with conviction. Well, Anthony Albanese is not that Prime Minister.
So it was between that one, the editorial. Usually it's just the newspaper that does one of them. Or the one where she said she had exclusive information. Oh, have we got it? Oh.
Exclusive inside information into the state of this election and the truth about the polls. Now, tonight I'm going to tell you how the polls you're reading in the news are wrong and what's really going on here.
She also said that a majority government was a fantasy and said that Dutton had different polling that showed he was absolutely in the game.
Well, to be fair, he did.
David, do you have a Tori of the typewriter?
I do. It is hard for me to choose. I had the same problem as yourself, so much to choose from. And as some of you might know, whenever I talk about News Corporation, I do sometimes go on for a bit. But I will restrain myself. My choice for tonight is an article that came out on the 1st of May from The Australian, the paper of record, or as I'll now call it, a slow-moving blog. The article was entitled Election 2025, Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong dine out with friends of the Chinese Communist Party. And it was a very long story which involved a whole lot of dinners and lunches and coffees and chats between Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong and all sorts of Australians of Chinese extraction. And I thought, gee, these guys are trying really bloody hard. Like, you can imagine, there's the editor. We've only got a few days left. We've got to get these idiots over the line. Has anybody got an idea? Well, we could do another Chinese Communist Party story. All right, get it going. You know, just a frantic, hopeless...
Because we haven't lost Menzies yet.
I was going to say, if you actually look at those booths...
Did somebody stick up their little hand at the back of the meeting and say, you know, calling every Australian of Chinese heritage a spy isn't necessarily working for us? But anyway, away we go. So
double-digit booths in all those eastern suburbs seats, like double-digit swing, towards Labor... in all of those areas. Box Hill, massive swing towards Labor. I do not think that's a coincidence.
No, I think all of them have suburban rail loop stations, but we can get to that at some other point. I've got the crowd on that one, David.
You do.
Wait for it.
They must all be members of the CFMEU.
Construction jobs will be part of it. That is true.
Some nominations as well from the audience. Mike, any of the oxygen wasters on Sky News After Dark. 100% agree with that. Robert, the entire media are thinking it would be close. Brendan, James Campbell, every column mentioning pathway to victory or Liberal polling. And Anonymous, man, come on, honestly, put your name to it. The Daily Mail for spreading totally fabricated figures, which led the Libs to invent their anti-free TAFE argument. Yeah, 100% with that one, absolutely. Okay, next category is the Mark Latham Handshake Award. So it's basically for the moment where the campaign turned, but for all the wrong reasons. Jessie, you're up first. Do you have one?
I have a series of them. I think that...
So buckle up, everyone.
No, I think that there were four key moments of just totally obliterating the idea that Dutton was a serious person or that he had any authenticity. And I think we've got a little clip that we're going to start with.
How many of those jobs would you like to see go to reach your 41,000 target?
None. We've been clear about that.
So only in Canberra?
Been very clear about that. We've been very clear about that, yes.
No cuts to healthcare, because that's what's been asserted to you.
No cuts, and we'll legislate it. We've been very clear about it.
And you won't make any changes to work from home?
No.
At all next term?
No, and we've been very clear about that. Believe in climate change. I've been very clear about that. We're not cutting health. We've been very clear about that. I don't agree at all with President Trump's approach to the tariffs, and I've been very clear about that. And if it stays in place, then I think it damages the relationship, and I've been very clear about that. I strongly support work from home. I've been very clear about that. We're going to fix up Labor's mess, and we've been clear about what we do in year 1 and 2. I answered the question in relation to the ute tax, and I've been very clear in relation to our position on the ute tax. And no, we've been very clear. We don't support a $14,000 tax on a Ford Ranger. We've been clear about that. We've been clear.
Never repeat the charge. Rule number one in politics. I've never fucked a goat. I want to be very clear about that.
But I think this is the problem. He wasn't clear about anything. He had 4 major backflips, like excusing some of these. One of them happened before the campaign where he sort of said that he was going to have a referendum on whether you could deport citizens or dual citizens or not. So he did that, and then the next day Angus Taylor came out and said, oh, well, that's not really our policy. I think
he's so good looking though.
So there was
Sorry, can I just say the fact that you guys think that this man is good looking shows the calibre of men in Parliament right now. It's a big worry.
It's called Parliament hot.
Yeah.
It's a different standard.
Benita
afterwards,
Benita afterwards will explain what a Labor 10 is, and it's an Ararat 8.
Poor Ararat.
Anyway, work from home, public service, job cuts. And then in the last week, he said he was going to de-woke the education department. And I think after floating that he was just going to cut the health department and education department entirely. He said, we're going to de-woke it. And then the next day he was like, no, not really. Like, this.
Well, I love it when some wag worked out that, cutting 41,000 public servants in Canberra just meant all of them.
Yeah.
And suddenly everyone in the intelligence agencies, everyone in ASIO. Oh, fuck.
So I think that was his handshake moment. The fact that he went to the election, in my view, as a strong, tough, you may not like what I say, but I stand behind it. He completely undermined his own message.
But he was very clear about that. David, do you have a Mark Latham moment?
The Mark Latham Handshake Award. Well, I don't know if this qualifies as the moment the campaign turned, and I've kind of touched on this already, but I thought when Peter Dutton got excited about the Welcome to Country issue and suggested that Anzac Day dawn services should not involve Welcome to Country services. And then as the issue kind of unfolded over a few days, he doubled down on it and he kept talking about it. Now, I think this might have been something he could have flown as a kite 6 months out before an election.
We've got Little Proud to do.
And throw, because there's little pride there, is there? But to use your last week of a federal election on this hopeless foray, anyone who's sort of inspired by this issue is voting for you already. And anyone out there who's thinking, gosh, cost of living, whatever it might be, how do you think this is going to move them off? So I just thought it was a remarkable strategic misfire from a bunch of people who just had really run out of, they're their final week and they got absolutely nothing in the tank.
Audience nominations as well. And a number of you actually sort of said that Dutton trying to be human and failed like a sober Irishman from Mike. Is that racist?
That's racism.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later, Mike.
White racism is not okay, guys. Trump made that clear in the White House this week.
Stephen has had 3 martinis during this session, though.
Working from home. Dutton's son rolled out on the housing affordability from Brendan. And can I bring in Benita here? Your mother had views on this as well about Dutton's son being brought into this.
As a Greek mother, she was like, why won't Peter Dutton, who is a multi-millionaire, who has many homes, help his son? That's what she just could not understand that.
What did you call it?
What is it?
I can't remember what I called
Skip
it.
behaviour.
Skippy behaviour.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah.
Skippy behaviour.
Yeah.
That's skippy behaviour.
Yeah.
Okay.
No Greek person would do that, ever.
No. All right. Campaign what ifs is our next category. Benita, you're up first.
I am saying, what if the campaign didn't begin with the Liberation Day tariffs, right? Because that happened pretty much at the start. It created economic uncertainty. It shaked, investor confidence. Everyone's super balance dipped. And then Albanese came out and he looked measured. He looked pragmatic. He was steady. He was not going to do anything crazy. And then, all those sort of similarities that Peter Dutton liked to say about him and Trump actually started looking a lot more negative at that point.
David, I think you had the same as well.
I did, and I completely agree. I think it was a big moment in the campaign because it was really the moment where being Trump adjacent just became such a filthy place to be. And the sort of whole world dramatically lost confidence in him at the same moment. It sort of came on the back of his Zelensky memory.
Sorry, in Trump, because he was riding a wave of confidence before that.
I think there was a time there where, for right-wingers, he really was the thing. And
we should do a longer podcast about this, but I think that was a strategic fault, way back in the start. It wasn't that Trump became toxic. He was never going to be popular here. Anyway, continue.
Well, be that as it may, it was pretty clear after Liberation Day and that the whole of the world had turned on him. And so I think that was a moment where the sort of measured, as you say, Anthony came out. He didn't respond with a wild tariff response. It was the measured, stable leadership. It was a good moment for federal Labor. Dutton must have been grinding his teeth, and I think it mattered. Yeah.
Jessie?
I wonder what would have happened if the Liberals hadn't gone with freshwater polling. I They spent $1.5 million on people that decided that people voting no for the Voice was in some way an indication that they weren't going to vote Labor. Like, this is the Massachusetts, people say, of the country. We are a very progressive state, and we didn't majority vote yes. So the idea that this was an indicator of a Liberal vote is just insanity to me. So whether it reinforced that schism between head office and the leader's office, I don't know. Whether it would have meant that they had to focus their resources far more closely on actual seats that mattered, I think it's a real question about what impact it would have had. I have been on campaigns where the Liberals have worked out halfway through that their polling was absolute bunkus and they were reading it the wrong way, and you could see entirely their strategy shift about which seats they were visiting. It has a massive impact.
A number actually from our folks in the audience as well on this one. One of them I want to lift up from... I was going to go as well, but someone anonymously said the hurricane. What happens if the hurricane... Or the
cyclone that never happened.
Yeah. Like it bought Labor time. And it also meant that...
So it would have cost, we would have ended up with 88 seats?
But Dutton...
It brought us into a budget. It meant that Labor delivered a budget.
Yeah.
And it meant that we delivered tax cuts that were infinitesimal and late, but then Dutton opposed those tax cuts and everything was changed.
And it was also the first chink in the armour as well for Dutton. Dutton had played such a good game up until that point, and then he went to this fundraiser in Sydney and we're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, this is an absolute fuck up. I was like, oh, maybe you're not battle tested. So that was interesting. Jonathan Edward, I do believe. He's full name.
I can see him.
The RBA cuts. I mean, we had a bit of, I don't know if it's luck, but certainly those RBA
Good
cuts.
economic management's not luck, Stephen.
What else you got there? The rest of if Albo had fallen off the stage.
100 seats. 100 seats.
That's from Claire. I like that one.
I just don't understand why he didn't just say he fell.
Because he didn't fall.
But he did fall.
He never fell.
He absolutely fell.
He didn't fall.
Because what you don't understand, that was strategic genius, because the Libs got completely obsessed with it while Labor were able to do something else. It was all part of the plan. It was all part of the plan. It was a dead cat.
Just a stumble. He never fell.
It was 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is the Bronwyn Bishop Charter Helicopter Award for the best bit of dirt dug up on an opponent.
I have been told now that I can call this the Ben Foster Memorial Award.
So does anyone know that? You know how journos get Walkley Awards for writing stories that basically have been fed to them, no disrespect to you, Benita, fed to them by someone from the private office of a political campaign.
Don't tell them everyone's
Like, basically,
secret.
these Walkley Awards are awarded to people who are good at typing. Ben Foster literally stood over the shoulder of this journalist as they wrote this article about Bronwyn Bishop and the helicopter gate. And then they get an award, and Ben is at home just like watching the Hawks lose.
But it meant Laurie. But it meant Laurie Oakes went out on a high.
Yeah,
so.
He did go out on a high. So Ben can carry drinks.
Yes, and can
kill Bronwyn Bishop.
And do research. Anyway, so best dirt digging. Sorry, put my glasses on again. Benita, you're first.
I'm going to say the two Liberal candidates in Whitlam. So there was the first guy, Benjamin Britten, who said that diversity and equity quotas, Marxist ideology and woke ideologies, which is different, have weakened the country's defences, said women can't serve in combat positions, and then he got dumped. And then he got replaced with another guy who also was really into Marxist brainwashing at Australian schools. So I think it just shows again there's a problem with the Liberal Party federally
using Google.
It's just like the candidate vetting, candidate selection just continues to be a problem for them. I think this election we didn't see it as much with the Greens as we have at previous. I've seen it at a state level in previous elections. Some people have said
Ben Foster.
Yeah. Shoplifting is great. I love going and shoplifting. I remember that that Greens candidate. So I think that it is a sign that younger candidates are getting better at cleaning up their act. And I think it's a sign that the Liberal Party are not learning how to clean up their social media.
No, because the way you get pre-selected is the way you get deselected. Like that they get pre-selected for these views and then they get deselected during the campaign. It's an ongoing challenge in the Liberal Party that their base is so far away from reality, as opposed to everyone who's very normal in this room.
Oh, McCrone playing with the audience.
Because all the crazy people are at the Greens party.
Jessie, do you have a nomination?
Yeah, I think the Hamer hit so very clearly cost her that seat. Like, it was such a tight election in the end that I don't think we can point to another dirt-digging exercise that you could say, she might have won. Like, Tim Wilson won. Hamer's far more
Likeable
than him. And look, there was a bunch of work that Tim Wilson sadly did over a period of 3 years, but I think the property mogul takes out the win there.
David?
Well, I feel like you've covered this ably already. My favourite one is Zahid Safi down in Bruce. And because you've covered this so ably, I'll just cover one aspect of it that I think is underappreciated, and that is the footage of this candidate. Crime, it's all about crime. Cost of living, run away, run away. But what you may not see is alongside this candidate on the run is a staffer.
Yeah.
And these are the unsung heroes.
I want to buy that guy a beer.
Because you can just imagine somebody at Liberal Party headquarters, send in Fred, I need to meet with Fred. Fred, I've got a mission for you. No, don't send me down there. Fred, you got to do it. You got to look after Zahid. No!
And he's like, get out of the car. Stand up.
Move.
Stand up.
Open your mouth. Breathe in. Breathe out. 2 feet to the left. And this is the election campaign for this poor guy, is sitting on this fuckwit, trying to make sure he doesn't speak. It's crime. I'm worried about cost of living. Don't make anything up. Unsung hero, and I've seen his face. I feel like putting out a wanted poster so we can find him and have a beer with him.
Maybe we'll get him on a podcast. And in terms of audience nominations, very similar. Amelia Hamer, Andrew Hastie's opposing women serving the military on the front line. Who dug up that? That's I don't even.
No, this was the impressive part about the dirt they got out of the Whitlam candidate.
Said some years earlier.
They nailed the Whitlam candidate, and everyone was like, "Oh, deselect him." And they're like, "Oh, also Hastie said that."
Yeah.
And we're all just going to pretend that didn't happen.
Okay, on to the next category. Please stop helping award. So basically, the candidate or the surrogate or third-party endorser who's absolutely not helping the campaign at all. Benita, you've got one.
It was Jacinta Price saying she'd make Australia great again.
Yeah.
As Peter Dutton standing behind her, and you can see his heart kind of breaking, and also like, do I take the mic off a woman as she's talking, or do I just let her keep going? It was, again, when Trump became so toxic here, she goes out and copies the lines. It was just...
And the revelation there was Dutton had a heart. I'm funny. Like, you just give me like... Jessie's made a joke.
I'm very
we
funny.
Can make Australia great again. Is that an ode to Donald Trump? No. If I said that, I don't even realise I said that, but no.
Reid, I think you've got one.
Please start helping. Advance Australia. They spent $1.4 million on Meta and Google advertising, in more than Climate 200 spent. And how much do we hear about? How much money they were spending? More than the ACTU. Then after the election, they made themselves a little hype reel to pump themselves up about how they made the Greens lose all their seats. I can't help agree with the comment at the bottom, though. Can we make it a bit bigger? Like, I'm just some idiot from New Zealand. I don't know how preferences work, but I'm pretty sure that, like, a right-wing intervention into a Labor Green seat, like, I know that that's pretty dumb, so I agree with this comment.
Can I just say, too, the Liberals are, like, absolutely seething about this. The Cormac Foundation, which is their, I guess, nominated entity, $500,000 they gave to Advance. And they just could not understand how they were giving money to someone that was not the Liberal Party. And it's coming up a lot at the moment in Vic, obviously, because now there's a discussion around John Pizzuto and his costs. They're not helping him, but helping Advance.
Jessie.
Oh, yeah. Jane Hume, just in general. But specifically... Chinese spies. Like, she read that in The Australian and thought, I'm going to read that out on air. Like, as directed by the podcast, suddenly Labor had ads of her saying it all through the seats that mattered, and Gladys Liu was out there demanding an apology. Like, just brilliant. More of her.
Nominations from the audience. Mike, John Howard. Yeah, wheeling him out. Like, it's kind of getting... No one even knows who he is anymore. Like, at what point do you stop doing this? The man is really old.
We wheeled Hawkeye out.
Hawkeye's different. Hawkeye is hot. John Howard's not hot.
John Howard had an important job this week, which was to try and convince the National Party and the Liberal Party to start talking again.
And he nailed it.
Another one, the Lutheran Brethren, the Scarfies. Vols refusing to tell people where they were from, trying to bait Labor volunteers on unions, and Liberal branch members obviously uncomfortable by their presence. It got a bit of media, right? I mean, I just sort of, what do folks think about
Blessed
that?
be the fruit.
Yeah.
They're called non-cause actors. So apparently the Liberal Party are relying more and more on these non-cause actors who are either
Just
paid...
go to Airtasker like everyone else.
Well, there's paid. Yeah, they do paid volunteers as well. Which I guess shows, again, they don't have a lot of members. They don't have what Labor has, which is the unions that will come out and volunteer for them. Their membership is in free fall and it's ageing. I heard of one guy in New South Wales, 82 years old, and the Libs were asking him to man a booth all day. And he's like, I can't do it.
Because I'm going to be dead by the end of the day. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you at West Garth Primary School, we use 10-year-olds all day.
And two of them are over there.
I thought your son did a great job.
And the other one is Abby Chatfield helping the Greens as a bit of a... Has she got Bit of a dig there. Okay, let's keep moving on to the It's Time Award, which is the most iconic, unforgettable piece of campaign creative from the campaign. Interestingly enough, though, that's sort of challenging to do that given the conversation that we had before, Reid. But I mean, this is the one for me that sort of jumped out as the most iconic.
These are all cost of living measures introduced by the federal Labor government because we understand the pressure families are under, and every little bit helps. But look who was opposed to every single one of them. Whichever way you look at it, you'll be worse off under Dutton's.
Authorised P. Erickson, ALP Canberra.
That sort of old pos and egg stuff that we talked about before in the lead up to the actual election day, pretty cool. Reid, what about you?
Mine isn't a single piece. It's the Labor's Instagram strategy.
Italian brain rot.
The Italian brain rot. The aura videos. The hot elbow content. Whatever you want to call it.
Ararat 11.
But but specifically, P. Erickson, ALP Canberra needs a special mention. So this is some of the content. Tune.
Authorised P. Erickson, ALP Canberra.
So this video was one of the most liked videos from Labor through the whole campaign.
I'm really worried about all of you. I'm really worried.
It got 35,000 likes, which is like just
well earned. Look at that.
Charts. And it was like one of 5 videos that they did like that did numbers like that week. I think they went through the entire Charlie XCX album, making hot elbow mashups to each of the songs. But specifically, P. Erickson, ALP Canberra, gained this cult following. Which I loved. So yeah, my award is to P. Erickson, LP Canberra, and the whole digital team for just that wild video strategy, which did numbers, and the libs through Top and Guerra and their firm were doing the same kind of strategy, but it just simply wasn't landing for them because they were running this overwhelmingly negative, nasty, weird campaign, whereas Labor's was all framed in the positive, and they knew where their audience were at, and they were able to execute. And these comments is the audience, seeing that and vibing with them, and it worked.
Okay, let's move on to probably unanswerable questions. And the first one I'm going to ask, question I'm going to ask of you, I'm conscious of the time, and this could open up a can of worms, but in 3 years' time, will Anthony Albanese and Susan Ley be the two candidates leading their parties at the federal election?
Mate, Susan's not going to be leading next week.
It's pronounced Susan.
Sussan. I was going to say Sussan. Sussan?
Anthony Albanese, will he be the leader in 3 years' time?
David?
Well, obviously. I mean, has there ever been a leader who's more certain? I mean, the only reason he wouldn't be is if he got bored and wandered off.
It's like maybe he's bought a retirement.
I mean, we could be. We're in the. Yeah, it's just so mean. I'm ignoring it. We're probably in the first years of 1,000 years. No. Albo
mid-career.
Albo was rock solid before this election, and it's just looking better now. He will clearly lead us. As for Suzanne, I mean, perhaps a better question is, will there be a Liberal Party? Given the sort of coalition of conservative parties that is the Liberal Party, LNP, CLP, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a more relevant question.
I think after the 07 election, though, the Liberal Party went through Brendan Nelson, then they went through Malcolm Turnbull, and then eventually settled on Abbott. I don't think anyone thought on the night of the 07 election that Kevin Rudd wouldn't not be leading the Labor Party at that next election. It's an interesting concept.
Only people who knew him well.
At the next one, he ended up leading them again.
Yep. Okay, moving on. Jessie, do you have a probably unanswerable question?
Yes, I do. Can the Liberals win an election without immigration being the front and centre of it? They didn't, despite having a smattering of 5% of their messaging being about immigration. They have taken it as a central force of every winning election since, certainly even before Tampa, I would say. And it was not a central feature of this one. I still don't know why it wasn't. And
they did the run-up.
They did.
They were talking about it.
Yeah.
Labor was vulnerable. There were points of vulnerability.
Yeah. And I
think it might go to Liberation Day and not wanting to look Trumpy. But
I still think that there was a way to circle that square. So can they win without talking about immigration? And how do they manage the immigration discussion without being so rampantly racist that they entirely alienate the outer suburban voters that they keep saying they want to represent? So I like how you win.
Spies.
Yeah, the spies. So I'd be interested to see.
Right.
Unanswerable question. Will the Teals form a party? They have been truly rat fucked by the electoral funding changes.
Oh, give me a break. That's CRAP.
Yeah, so we were going to get to who were the real winners of the campaign. I was going to say Don Farrell, but
Don
go
Farrell.
on.
They now have a cap in seats of $800,000 for a candidate. They spent triple that to win seats like Kooyong.
Yeah, and when Clive Palmer does it, we get very upset.
They want to be able to call themselves independent while at the same time enjoying all of the benefits of being a registered political party. And too bad you can't.
Yeah, and I should never have sent my notes to you before tonight. Because the question for them is which of their two, fundamental advantages they're going to give up. Is it their framing as being independents, or is it their huge financial backing?
I think
independence. They're going to give up independence.
If you look at the state election in 2022, where we did have caps, none of them won. So I think that shows that you do need
what
that
it
behind
shows
you.
is there Clive Palmer on the left, isn't it? Like, okay, why is it that you can have some big wandering oligarch with shit tons of money they inherited, spewing it out to distort our politics, and it's virtuous here, and when precisely the same phenomena happens over here with the trumpet of parrots, it's evil. Like, guess what, boys and girls? It's evil all the time.
Hear, hear.
Very good. Okay, last category. So I'm moving through quickly now because people want to go home. Who won the?
Benita wants to go home.
Who won the campaign? Obviously, apart from the Labor Party. Woo! I'm just going to throw out some questions there. If you want to jump on it, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Podcasts. Did podcasts win the campaign?
Well, the rest is politics. Won the campaign because, as some of you might recall, during the campaign we had something of a disagreement amongst us, and turns out the argument ended in my favour, where I said that Anthony's decision to go on the rest is politics was a masterstroke, and there were doubting Thomases, who said that he shouldn't be going into the ecosystem of the future and shaping it for progressive politics, and they were wrong.
Like Adam Ban, I'm still waiting for the London postals to come in to see.
That's that last 10%. Very good, Red. The Medicare card. Did the Medicare card win this campaign?
Got a lot of FaceTime.
It got a lot of FaceTime.
Every time that it happened, we were just like, oh, and here it is again and again.
And that's how you know it's working.
Exactly. It's like Glenn McGrath is a metronome just down that corridor of inconsistency. Suburban Rail Loop, did that win the campaign?
I think it did because
journo.
I know. No, because if you think about it, Keith Wallahan in Menzies was putting out letters saying that they were going to cut funding. He was sending out to his constituents letters saying, we are going to cut the Suburban Rail Loop. And I just think that is very weird to spruik cutting in the seat that it's going to benefit. That just doesn't... So when people say, oh, it had nothing to do with it...
I've said he's the future of the Liberal Party. He's not. If that's the kind of campaign strategy he's employing...
Letters to constituents saying, I'm going to cut Suburban Rail Loop. I think that was tone deaf.
And he was taking his lead from Peter Dutton, who came to Victoria, ostensibly to talk about the rail link, but at a winery, but at the same time made the day about a funding cut announcement. It was insane.
Incumbent Labor premiers, did they win the campaign? Asterix, clearly Jacinta Allen couldn't have been a part of that story. I'm going to leave that hanging. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, you are.
I know. Debates. Interesting figure here. 2.1 million people watched the Channel 9 debate, 1.7 million watched the ABC debate, 1.3 million watched the Channel 7 debate, 400,000 people watched the Sky debate.
And we know all their names.
Yeah. I don't know, I've always sort of ruled out, I thought debates have been a bit of a waste of time, but it's interesting the numbers that came out of that. I just thought...
Yeah, although remember in 2010 the Gillard-Abbott debate got something like 3.5 million, so...
Did they still have the worm then?
I don't think they did, actually. No, but the worm was the thing
I
where...
feel old. I don't usually feel old, but you just made me feel really old.
Yeah, the olden days.
In 2013?
The worm, I think, made it interesting.
Well, the channel that didn't get the debate would then run the feed with a worm. That was the thing. Anyway, so I think the debates now cumulatively reach the importance that single debates did only 15 years ago.
Labor Senate candidates running in the death spot, did they win the campaign?
Yeah.
I think that 21 from South Australia, this was always the life plan. Yeah, Charlotte, I think any president of Young Labor who puts their name on the ticket deserves that seat.
She turned 21 on election day.
And happy birthday.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Great story.
It means it must have been her first vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She joined the Labor Party 2 years before that. Yeah. Amazing.
I know. Normally just have...
Deeper Labor connection than Senator Payman, but anyway, we move on.
Stick that knife in. Daily Mail headlines. Grace, do we have that headline ready to go? Headline. Nope. Here we go. Daily Mail. Teal doctor Monique Ryan, who doesn't answer journalist questions, has a rogue husband who tears down candidate signs, celebrates victory after being pooed on by a bird on election day.
Can I just say something about this?
Please
this
do.
is an AAP story that my colleague Callum wrote. None of that is in the copy because they get AAP and then they just add their own headline to it.
That's
None
phenomenal.
of that is in there.
I clicked on that story. It works.
I had to read that out like 30 times to not be able to piss myself laughing as I read it out. There's so much going on in that headline. It's
so much anger, isn't there? Like,
someone pooed on her.
It's good luck. And she won.
Okay, final question. We're here, folks. We're at the end. And I, being a sort of sports fan, I always want to stack up wins against other wins. And I've sort of been thinking this week, where does this win fit in the all-time federal Labor campaign wins that we've ever had? Not that there's been that many, certainly in the post-war era. Obviously, there was 2 from Whitlam, 4 from Hawke, 1 from Keating, 1 from Rudd, and now 2 from Albanese, which is the first time we've had back-to-back wins in election since Hawke. And so we've asked you guys as well to vote on what you thought.
2010.
There's a draw. So we've asked you guys to sort of vote on it. We've had a bit of a chat beforehand about what do you think is the top 5. And we've sort of said, Whitlam 72, Hawke 83, Keating 93, Rudd 07, and this one. But where does it actually fit in the pantheon of greatest election victories for the Labor Party? And I want to throw it up to you guys first of all before I reveal the results of what our audiences thought. Who wants to take a stab at where do you want to put this? 1, 2, 3,
I imagine
or 5?
the people that remember the elections before 2007
I was
should
just going to
start.
say I can't.
We weren't born.
well, when I was handing out in the 50s.
With Brendan Donahue.
Well, I mean, I guess my 83 was a great election result because it was kind of Labor coming back after a period in the wilderness and the decisive defeats at the end of the Whitlam period. So that was special. I think the Keating, the election victory that no one expected, that was special. Ending the Howard era so decisively in 2007, that was special. But I think this one is candidate for best of the lot.
Wow.
Because the scale of it, the implications for the coalition in its aftermath. I mean, after 72, after 83, after 93, the Liberal Party was not in an existential crisis like it is now. So I think that matters. And of course, we're used to this system, this cycle where Labor wins big and then sort of slowly you run down your political credit. We're not used to this phenomena where you kind of have a narrow victory, crawl to the next election, and then boom, your mandate is so powerfully invigorated. So I reckon it might
Maybe
be
not
this
in
one.
federal politics.
Jesse?
And you also didn't mention the Greens at all in there.
And we're not going to, because unlike the Greens, we're not obsessed with them. Like, they're just an annoying road hump to victory.
We just spent 20 minutes on them about 5 hours ago. But yeah. Anyone else got any reflections?
I do think the fact that 2007 we had to win, and I think we won that election. That was not a case of the federal Liberal government destroying themselves and us picking up. And I would say
they
that
did stick with Howard when they clearly should have shifted to Costello. It wasn't the disaster that this was. It wasn't the disaster that 2013 was. It was an election victory. And I think similarly in 93, that was an election victory, that we won that against all odds.
The front page of the papers that night said that we lost.
Yeah. I had sitting in my office the two
because they were a
fronts.
slow-moving blog, weren't they?
But I think this one, we won the Libs destroyed themselves. So it is a question of what your metric is. If it's the aftermath and what it means, I agree with David. If it's a question of the campaign and how brilliant it was and how I think 93.
Anyone else want to jump on that? We're good. Okay, so I think 93 as well, but I'm not going to bother telling you why. No Love for Hawke, 83 or 07. None of you voted for those ones. Still a lot of dislike for Kevin Rudd.
It's Ambassador Rudd to you, mate.
Yeah.
And isn't he doing a stellar job?
20% of you voted for the Keating 93 election. 27.7% of you voted for the Whitlam 72 election. 53% of you voted for this election.
Recency bias.
Yeah, well, it all works out in the end because we fucking won. That doesn't matter. Okay, let's close this out. First of all, can I just say to everyone, thanks to the staff at the TOF. Can you give them a round of applause? Can I thank our major sponsors, Morris Blackburn Lawyers and Dunn Street. Can we also thank Raph and Fergus for warming us up again tonight? Can I also thank our producer, Grace Eyre, who's at the back there, who's done an absolutely amazing job. Like, when I say Grace has done an amazing job, she's done everything. This is her coffee table from home. All right? That's the detail that we go to make you feel at home for our podcast, all right? We bring the shit, all right? Can I also thank our wonderful audience and our Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. And finally, can you all thank our special guests, David Feeney, Jessie McCrone, Benita Kolovos, and Reid Fleming. About 3 minutes of this episode will be published next Friday. I want you to listen to it. If you don't subscribe to the podcast, please do. And I look forward to having a beer with you in the bar next door in a couple of minutes. Thanks very much. Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.